Hey guys, I'm Kevin from Get a Life Podcast Kunai, and you're listening to our Spring 2016 Simcast special. And if you're new to our Simulcast specials, and you're like, what the fuck are those? Don't worry, because I'm pretty new to them too. Actually, I was supposed to be on our last and first Simcast special, which was Dagashi Kashi. So if you didn't listen to that, check it out. As usual, I'm joined by Bish.
Hello.
And Joe.
Hello.
And today, the three of us, we're going to be talking about Kiznaiver. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, though, and get into the heart of the discussion, Bish, could you explain what Simcast specials are, since they're pretty new?
For those who are new to Simulcast Special, these are basically special episodes that will be aired once per season, covering one series in the most recent season of anime. So with these episodes, our goal is to stay up to date with the hottest new series and get a taste of what things are new in the anime industry and what they have to offer to us. It also gives us a chance to share our opinions on current anime instead of just going back to older anime, like Haganai and all this kind of stuff. But there are some restrictions, and I'll go through them now. We won't be covering any sequels, so that means no Food Wars Season 2, no Attack on Titan Season 2, and we're not going to cover any prequels or spin-offs or any series that's pretty much over 13 episodes long, and it won't replace any monthly episodes either. It's going to air alongside them. Like the regular episodes, we're not going to cover the source material for this anime, and we can be found on Stitcher, iTunes, and now on Google Play. And if you'd like to share your thoughts, you can contact us at GALPKunai on Twitter, or by email at galp.pea@gmail.com. In addition to that, if you really want to support us out and you think we're awesome, you know what you can do? You can go to www.lootcrate.com/kunai, and you know what? Sign yourself up for Loot Anime, because it's a fucking amazing box. We're not sponsored by Loot Anime, but we've reached out to them. They gave us this link, and it's something for you guys, because it's a fucking amazing service, and I personally use it myself.
For those of you who do not know what Kiznaiver is, in which case I highly suggest you go watch Kiznaiver before actually listening to this episode. Kiznaiver, or Kizna for short, is an action, thriller, sci-fi, and drama original anime show written by Mari Okada. Sorry if I mispronounce the names here, I'm not Japanese, so. It aired during the spring season of 2016, obviously, and ran for 12 episodes. Kiznaiver is produced by Studio Trigger, you may know because they also produced Kill la Kill, which is another really well-known anime. And it was directed by Hiroshi Kobayashi, who also directed stuff for Kill la Kill. In terms of story, I'll be quite concise. It's actually quite simple. So the story revolves around 7 students, right, who live in this city. I believe it's called Sugomori City, right? And on the surface, this city looks pretty normal, right? It's just your average Japanese city, with normal stuff going on. But underneath all this, underneath this facade, some shady shit's going on. Basically, the city was founded by an association of businesses and the government of Japan to experiment with the Kizuna System, which is basically, the goal is to link people through their pain, and what they hope to achieve through this is basically peace, world peace, somehow. And basically, we follow the lives of these 7 students who are unwillingly forced to be part of this program, and their trials and tribulations. That's basically the backdrop for this anime. But moving on to our first impressions, though. Who wants to start?
I'll start first. My first impressions, I think initially this show was introduced to me. I'm going to give a shout out to Tyson. He's probably listening to this. I saw his show called Impressions about this anime, and I was like, ugh, I hate this show. Like, that's the feeling I had. I just hated the show from the first impressions. I really didn't want to watch it. And then it came to the point where we had to choose something for the simulcast, and we chose this anime, so we kind of went with it in that sense. My first impressions of actually watching the show from the first sort of episodes, I was hyped. I got hooked because the anime is so colorful and there's an underlying tone to it. You kind of get flashbacks from the past, so the anime wants you to know more, and it makes you want to know more as well. Like, I really want to stay on and figure out what the hell the story was. So that's in terms of first impressions, it got me hooked from the first episode.
Well, I'd say mine is a little generic because here's the thing, I'm actually a fan of Trigger's past work, and so it was really exciting to hear about this new show. And then I decided I decided I need to watch this because I love the designs for each of the characters, especially a certain character. Like when I saw Nico for the first time, like these artists know what they're doing. Like they know how to make something pop. So I just because of the art design and because just I really want to watch the show, I decided to watch it, and it got me hooked.
It's really interesting. You know what? I'm surprised that your first impressions are basically the same as mine, in terms of design anyway. So, like Bish said, we were kind of choosing a show for a Simcast special for spring 2016, right? And we were on this is how it went down. So basically, I was just scrolling down Stargaze charts, all right? And it's a site where we can see the next season's shows, all right? And the reason Kiznaiver caught my eye, not gonna lie to you here, is because of the art, all right? The art for this anime and the general design is on fucking point, all right? And I haven't watched Studio Trigger anime in the past, but if the art that I've seen for Kill la Kill has told me anything about Studio Trigger, it's that they know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to design and art direction, right? Like Bish said, the colors it's really colorful anime, right? And the colors pop. There's nice contrast. The character design is really nice. No two characters in this anime looks the same, right? So they're really unique and really special, and that I have to commend. In terms of moving aside from the design though, in terms of the first few episodes, I have to give it some credit where credit's due, right? The story is interesting, all right? Because honestly, I can't think of any anime out there that has the same premise, this experiment where people are linked by their pain. It's really unique, and it's this uniqueness that makes me want to watch it. But at the same time, right from the first episode, I found that, to be honest, it was a bad pilot, all right? And I'll tell you why. There's just way too much exposition, right? So I don't know if you guys remember, but Sonozaki, who is the main protagonist, or one of the main protagonists, she's the girl with the light blue hair, who's mostly expressionless. During the first episode, she basically goes on this whole exposition, right, about, the 7 sins or something, and about how each of the characters that were selected were based on the 7 sins. But they're not even the 7 sins, because she mentions basically 7 personas that you find in high schools, which these characters somehow fit under. So it's really weird, didn't make sense to me, going into the anime. And there's also, if you remember, the huge info dump when they're all kidnapped, right? And she explains the Kizuna program to her, right? So it's this exposition, in my opinion, that ruins the first episode, all right? Because, yeah, the premise is interesting, I'll give it that, but exposition is boring, all right? That's how you kill interest. No one wants to, get read a wall of text, right? That's not interesting. That's not what appeals to me as a viewer. I don't know what you guys think about that, but what you think about, Sonozaki in the first episode in general? Do you think there was too much exposition?
I think we needed that. We needed it because you're going to introduce us into this kind of scape where it's a completely new idea. We don't quite understand the Kizuna program. If you were to throw us in there without any sort of exposition, we wouldn't have known what the fuck's going on. I think it would have been too much of a mystery, and then we needed to have a much longer anime instead. So I understand why they decided to have that exposition in the beginning, and to be honest, I liked it because the anime itself doesn't have a lot of backstory other than what you get at the beginning and what you get at the end. The middle doesn't have any sort of backstory, so I find myself getting lost, in terms of, okay, who is Nori-chan? Who are these characters? What are the Goromori things? What are the characters' relationships with each other? How do they know each other? We only found these things at the beginning, briefly, and at the end. And I think it didn't even give us full closure because of that, because we didn't know the full thing. And to be honest, if we didn't have that exposition at the beginning, the anime just would have felt unfinished.
And I agree with you there, right? Just to clarify, I'm not saying that they are wrong to use exposition, right? Perhaps it was the only way to shove in all of that info within the first episode to give the viewer the information they need to continue in the anime, right? Because without that background information, you'd be completely fucking lost and you'd have no idea what's going on. Nonetheless, though, I have to bring up that exposition for me, it's not the best device to use, because you can use it, but it's still boring, right? I can understand why they did it, I just still don't like it, right? As stubborn as that may sound. I would argue, though, I don't know if you agree with this, Bish, I'd argue that the second episode works better as a pilot episode because, if you remember correctly, the second episode, what did it have? It had all 7 characters, 6 actually, sorry, because Hisomu was not introduced yet. In the second episode, they're all forced to play this like death game, right? It's kind of like Saw. It kind of reminded me of
yeah, but the reason we knew the context behind the death game was because of the first episode.
Admittedly, but
so you can't say like the second episode could work as a pilot because
certainly, but certainly not. But through this death game, you know the mechanics of the Kizuna system. You get to see it firsthand rather than just having it read aloud to you. And secondly, in the first episode, you don't know much about the side characters. In the second episode, through their fears and through them being put through immense pressure and put through these tight situations, you learn about their personalities and who they are, right? Without them, like, being read to your face.
I just want to interject for a bit. I kind of agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I kind of disagree about you saying that the second episode would have served as a better pilot, only because, the second episode in itself seemed kind of cheesy, like it's already been done. For example, these are a bunch of misfits who each of them have their own fears that they don't want to tell each other, and that's what mainly happened in the second episode. It had a Persona vibe to it. It was just like, oh really, you're going to announce who your true self is and then pass the test by doing so? It did have a Persona vibe, you know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Because, when in Persona 4, each and every one of them had this secret that they didn't want to kind of reveal out to the people and accept themselves for who they really are. And you see this in Kiznaiver as well, at least in the second episode. Yuta doesn't want to admit that he was fat. And I can't remember Tenga's fear, afraid of dogs, which, to be honest, we get references of everyone else's fears before, after. But we don't actually get Tenga's fear. Like, no one ever mentions that he's afraid of dogs ever again in this anime. So you only get that in episode 2. It's just like, what the hell?
Well, wasn't he the first person to reveal a fear though?
Yeah.
He was, but I feel that his fear was just like...
It was just there to get the wheel rolling.
If you think of it like that, if you take down the consideration, then you can assume that maybe that was kind of like the intro fear, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, it was like the
it's
fear
meaningless.
to like show like this is how it works.
Yeah. I think that Tenga's fear was only there because, it's not referenced much at all later on. It's not there just so that other characters start, talking about their fears. It's there to get the wheel rolling, so to speak. And Bish, to retort, it's really interesting that you mentioned Persona because now that I think about it, yeah, that is true. But aside from Persona, though, I can't think of many others any other shows that have used this concept. I mean,
it's not just this concept. I think it's a merge of multiple concepts. For example, Haganai, a bunch of misfits, people that you wouldn't assume to be friends become friends because they don't actually have friends. That's the premise of Haganai. This is basically Haganai and Persona mangled together, and I think one other anime, but I can't quite remember the third anime. It was a mixture of 3 animes that came into my mind that kind of created... Oh, the third one was Kill la Kill. Obviously because it's Studio Trigger and the character design and even how the characters act is very reminiscent of Kill la Kill, but I'll get more into that specifically in the characters portion. But yeah.
So, perhaps I just didn't speak correctly. I didn't mean that the second episode would be a better pilot, literally. It's just that I personally found that you learned more about the characters and the plot in a more interesting way than the first episode. Which, granted, like I said, yeah, they kind of had to use exposition, but I personally enjoyed the second episode a lot more. I came out of the first episode kind of, disappointed because of the exposition, and the second episode immediately fixed that. So I'm really glad that happened, and it didn't drag on for a very long time. Because honestly, if I was just watching this with my own leisure, I think that had the exposition in episode 1 dragged on much, much longer, then I honestly would have dropped it. Moving on, though, past first impressions, though, do you guys have any moments in the anime that particularly come to mind, though, when you're talking about favorite moments? Because I'm surprised that Bish says that there's exposition at the beginning and at the end, and there's little to nothing in between. Honestly, I would disagree, right? Respectfully there.
How so?
I think that, because some of my favorite moments in episodes here are, it's the mini Maki arc, right? I don't know if you remember that. That's in episode 7.
See, that's the thing. That's not what I'm talking about. In terms of exposition, I meant more so the backstory of this anime. I didn't mean the characters' side stories. Because the Maki arc is needed to kind of push forward the actual story of this anime. Do you see what I mean? It's not...
Okay, so you're talking about just the setting here, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the setting, and I'm talking about specifically this whole Kiznaiver deal. Because Maki's arc has nothing to do directly with the Kiznaiver program. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to know more about the Kiznaiver program, and we only got snippets of that, most in the beginning and mostly at the end as well. And by the end, I mean the last 3 episodes.
Was it completely devoid? But the only, if I remember correctly, the only way the origins of the program were referenced was through very small flashbacks to the original Kizuna program with the kids.
Yeah.
So I guess on one side you could say that, oh yeah, it's interesting because you don't know too much about the original program, so that motivates you to continue to watch. But I don't know. I found that it was kind of a tease, perhaps too much of a tease for me. But I don't know. It just the way that they paced this.
So as you were saying about the Maki arc, you were mentioning that it was your favorite.
Yeah. Well,
I want to know why really.
Why? Well, it's not like the Maki arc, in my opinion, is super original, right? The concept here, I think, has been done before in other anime. Where this character has a tragic past, and they don't want to talk about it, and they shut themselves away from the rest of the world because of that, right? It's been done over and over in a bunch of other anime. But the reason why I brought it up and why I think that it sticks out in this anime is not because it's particularly very good. It's more like it's the only interesting thing in the middle of the anime that happens for me. Because Maki, for some reason, is one of the side characters that gets more character development than the others, right? Like Tenga, Yuta, they don't get nearly as much backstory as Maki. Maki gets several episodes in the middle, nearing episode 7, I think it's episodes 5, 6, and 7, where she gets her own arc and they dive into her past, right? You don't really even get this with the main character, Kachun, until the very end. So that's why this episode comes to mind, because the other characters, unfortunately, are kind of boring at that point for me. And it kind of explains why she's a bitch, right? Because up until that point, I'll be honest, she is a bitch, right? You don't really have much of a reason to like her. She just acts cold. She acts because she doesn't really give a shit. And that explains why she's come to act that way. And, it kind of opens her character up and it makes her more interesting, right? You're able to understand her.
I kind of saw it as her, the reason she was so rude was because she didn't really like herself. She really didn't care about much, because it's like she felt like she killed a friend dear to her, and because of that, it's kind of burdened her for the longest time, and she just doesn't really care about her actions as much as she used to.
If I were to put it into words, it's she doesn't care about others at that point in the night because she doesn't want to care, because in the past that's gotten her hurt, right? With her old friend, she didn't take her friendship all the way to the end because she didn't want to get hurt, right? So that's why she shut herself away.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's kind of a cliche, right? I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think that has been done before.
See, it's been done before, and I think mainly it's been done in a lot of romance anime. I understand they decided to do this for dramaticism, so you actually feel for Maki, as opposed to having her just be there like the rest of the character. Let's be honest, Yuta doesn't have much character development, and she, at the moment, has the most,
So it's not like that episode was particularly good.
But that's the thing, why is it your favorite? That's what I want to know.
It was diamond in the rough. Not a particularly beautiful diamond, but compared to the other characters who did not get any development or very little development, it was better, because yes, it was a cliche, but at least it was something.
I feel that they spent too much time on her episode, and it didn't, her backstory didn't make much sense. She was clearly in love with her friend and whatnot, and I didn't understand when they went into the mum's house and Nico was saying, she feels bad about this, and she feels like she's killed her, and then the mum basically says get out. I understand why the mum said get out, because the mum couldn't handle that conversation, but at the same time it's like the mum acknowledges that Maki killed her, but in real life, she died, if I'm not mistaken, didn't she die of some sort of...
She died from terminal kidney disease.
Yeah, exactly. So she had some sort of terminal illness. So I don't see how that's attributed to Maki, and why the mother is so, oh, fuck Maki. You know what I mean? That doesn't make sense, because her kid was going to die anyway.
I think that the reason why she's so pissed here is it not because Maki literally killed What's-Her-Face, because she didn't, right? She didn't.
No, she didn't.
But the thing is, what happened, to my understanding, was that before she died, the month before she died, she completely cut off all contact with her friend, and they didn't speak at all, basically. And the mom is really pissed off at Maki for cutting off communication.
That's bullshit, because you can obviously tell. Like, I can understand the mum's thinking, oh, she might have made my daughter like really depressed and whatnot, but the daughter actually wrote such a beautiful ending, a good ending instead of a shitty ending, as what Maki thought. So that kind of shows that, yeah, she was probably going through some hardships, but she wasn't depressed to that point. Like, she had acceptance.
Yeah, if the illness thing wasn't there, I think that things would have gone very differently. But the important thing here about the mom's reaction, it's very harsh, but if I were to put myself in her shoes, I think I'd understand. Because the mom doesn't know about what goes on, behind the scenes between Dururu and Maki, right? All she knows is that she has a terminally ill daughter, all right, who has one single friend, right? And that friend, like, means everything to her, all right? And that friend just left her without telling her why while she was dying, right? In her last moments. And she wasn't there for when she was dying. So from that, if you take it from that point of view, you can kind of understand why the mom was so pissed. Is she correct in being pissed? I don't know. That's not for me to decide, but...
Oh, yeah, I understand that. But for her to say, oh, she killed my daughter, that's a bit ridiculous for me.
Well, yeah, but her child died, right? There can't really always be rational when something of that magnitude happens.
Well, that could imply that, like, right after they were both abandoned, like after Ruru was abandoned by Maki, it's like she kind of just felt really bad about her.
But see, that's the thing. The anime doesn't give us that information, so we can't make assumptions.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's just a theory of mine. It's not really like an assumption. It's not really like saying something concrete.
So, for me, I would say my favorite episodes and moments was when the Hikikomori was introduced, the guy who loves pain. That was very odd in a way, because for me,
right?
Well,
yeah,
Yoshiharu Hisono.
Yeah, Yoshiharu. Oh my god! Like, when he was first introduced, it was hilarious because everyone was like, "Oh my god, he's so sexy." He's like, it's like Tumblr looking at characters from Free. That's how it clicked in my mind. It felt like that. And it's the same sort of thing when Yuta was introduced as well. It was like, that's one of my favorite moments. It was in episode 2. Everyone's like, oh my god, it's Yuta-kun, it's Yuta-kun. And he's like, yes, I am Yuta-kun. And then all the girls were like, ah! That was one of my favorite episodes.
And I was like, he's like...
Haru.
He's like Haru.
He's Haru.
He's not
as
like muscular as Haru, but like that's like Haru's brother or something.
And right? The other one reminds me of Rin. See, this is
Tenga?
This. I don't want to.
Wait, Tenga reminds you of Rin, really?
Not Tenga. No, the guy that likes pain.
He reminds you of Rin?
I don't know, because he has that weird slender kind of body, kind of like Rin, and I don't know. I'm not sure if he has sharp teeth, but he looks like the kind of guy that has sharp teeth. Anyway, I like his introduction because he likes pain, and that's made as a joke a lot, but I liked how it took the main character to jump off a bridge for him to actually come to his senses and be like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna join you guys.
His reaction was weird, though.
You know, he was having orgasms, effectively.
Basically.
Yeah. Paingasms?
Yeah, in a way, but no, he was getting some sort of sexual pleasure from it. But, everyone's different strokes for different folks. And
he's a masochist.
Yeah, he's a masochist. And, I can't blame him for liking pain. That's up to him. And I find it very smart how that episode was kind of set out and kind of structured. So that's why it was one of my favorite episodes. Joe?
My favorite episode would probably... Well, it's not like an episode per se, but I really liked... Because there's one point in the show where they started going really deep into the past. You know what I'm saying?
Can you specify? Like, is it episode 9 perhaps, where they really go into every character's backstory?
I know that there was a point where they were talking about the past in bulk. Like they were talking about like the past Kiznaiver system, and
that was towards the end, if not mistaken. It's episode 9. Yeah, episode 9 actually happens to be one of my favorite episodes as well. That's what you're talking about.
I guess you could say my favorite episode was the one when Noriko and Agata, when they were both in the gym, and then because he realized he was connected to Noriko, and then they were talking about how like the reason why he can't feel pain. It wasn't talking about that episode, but after that, this is more like a favorite moment, like not like a favorite episode.
So was it specifically like the interaction between Noriko and Kachon, that like the revelation?
Yeah, the attraction between Noriko and Katsuhira. And like then they talked about like the past and how they were both connected through the past Kizuna system, and how something went wrong, and because of that, Noriko ended up absorbing like the pain of 19 people at once. and it kept multiplying, and she ended up basically going insane.
Well, that's not in episode 9. That's like the whole last part of the anime. The thing is, it's kind of tricky because, like Bish said, I kind of realize that now. Like, the backstory for Gatra, in the case, and Sonozake. Arguably, you can say that they're the two main characters, right? I know that the 7, they're the main characters, but like the main protagonists here, arguably, are Sonozake and Agata, right? And you only really learn about them.
Yeah, because like the first episode starts straight up with like, I'm gonna show you how to get your pain back. Like one day.
Because of that, actually, I don't know if you guys think the same way, but I found that whole connection between Agata and Noriko, I found it to be very predictable. Like,
yeah, no, it was very predictable. It's like it's more like this show really had my curiosity going, because it really wanted me to know more about more about what's happening. It's like, why can't he feel, like, I was wondering throughout the entire show, like, why couldn't he feel pain? Like, what's his connection with Sonozaki? And it's like, and then you realize, like, oh, the reason he can't feel pain is because his emotions were essentially drained out of him.
I found that, from my point of view, yeah, the story's cool. It's just that since it's so predictable, since they kind of put that moment in the very first episode right away, it kind of telegraphed what was happening, right?
Yeah, you can predict the ending from the beginning.
Yeah.
The only thing I knew about from that small part was like his pain was taken away from him, and Sonozaki was related to it somehow. Like, so to that end, that was predictable. But I couldn't really think that 19 people ended up going into Sonozaki and she didn't send it back. That I could not predict.
Yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, we weren't introduced to these 19 people until, somewhat maybe episode 8 or 9, when we kind of found out that there was more Kiznaiver subjects.
I know, but that's one. Well, that's not what I'm arguing. I'm just saying, like, this is my favorite moment, because like that when they revealed everything, and like when they revealed that all these people are part of the system, and like how their emotions were drained, and Noriko's basically absorbing all their pain.
I completely agree there, Joe.
And it's the reason why she has tranquilizers over and over, because if she doesn't, then she's gonna go crazy.
I agree, because obviously, even though we don't know the characters very well, I did feel a bit sad, at that one scene where fucking Agata, he sees his old friends, the ones in the original Kizuna experience, and they're all like fucking,
oh my god,
they're vegetables basically, and he just fucking breaks down in tears.
It was a whole 30 seconds of him crying. It made me feel so sad.
It was sad, to be honest, but I'm a sucker for crying scenes, and it was sad. But like Bish said, we don't know these 19 people. So the question is, why the hell should I give a fuck about these 19 people? Yeah, it's sad. If you tell me, for example, that 19 people died, I'll be like, yeah, that's sad, right? That's sad. It's a sad thing. But I don't have a personal reason to care about those 19 people because we don't know much about them. They're just 19 names.
It might just be a me thing, because any bad thing that happens to any character in the show just makes me feel really sad. It's like,
yeah, but that's the thing. Like, this show doesn't have much development to it anyway. And going back onto Kevin's point, I completely agree with you. Why should we care about these side characters, these 19 people? And I don't think even the anime cares about them, because they all look the same. All of them look the same. They're just slightly modified.
Exactly.
And it's just like, really?
If you look at the design...
Well, they describe each of the characters briefly. Like, they talk about they talk about Katsu.
That's the thing. That's very shallow. And obviously, yes, because they're kids, I can understand why it's shallow. But it's also the fact that we don't know who is who.
Exactly.
If I ask you who was Asuka, and I gave you all of them, would you remember which one's Asuka? No, because they all look the same.
No, I wouldn't. No, I'm saying I totally agree with you. Like, the introductions could have been better. I'm just saying, like, to some extent they were introduced.
Well, yeah.
And the reason we should care about them, like, when they're revealed, is because, like, they were, like, it's because of Sonozaki, because all their emotions were sent into Sonozaki and they weren't sent back.
Even then, I don't give a shit, because sorry to burst people's bubbles here, alright? Sorry, Team Sonozaki people, but I just don't give a shit. Well, I'm not inclined to give much of a shit about Sonozaki either, right? Because, yeah, she does get some interesting points about that, her past is interesting to a certain extent at the end where they, make some revelations. But throughout the entire fucking anime, alright, sorry, rant here, I think that Sonozaki and Agata, for two main characters, they are fucking dull, alright? I'm sorry, I have to be blunt. They're fucking dull.
I understand that, Kevin, and I think the anime does them a disservice. The anime story does them a disservice, because they can say, well, they're dull.
I wouldn't even say it's the story. It's more like the pacing. It's like...
No, I think it's the story. But what I'm saying here is that it's the fact that the show gives itself a reason. They could say, oh, okay, these characters are only so dull because they had their emotions taken away from them because of the Kiznaiver system, and I think that's a very bullshit reason, and people will say that to kind of defend these characters. But I think it's just probably either a restraint from, Studio Trigger trying to get this out as soon as possible, or pacing issues mainly, but they can use that as an excuse, or people who disagree can use that as an excuse.
I don't think that that's a valid excuse, right? Because
me neither, but I'm saying this is what people could say.
Yeah, and I'll explain why those people are wrong, right? I think that this is what was going through Studio Trigger's minds. They're like, right, yeah, we'll have two kind of like monotone, expressionless characters, and yeah, granted, there is a plot point behind it, but people will forgive us because we'll have a really cool twist at the end, right? It will blow their minds. But for me,
if anything, I think it's reasonable to say that they were used as plot devices.
They were. A lot of characters are used as plot devices. Sonozaki, I believe.
It's just like plot devices with a little bit of personality. That's how I think I could agree with that description.
Even if you have the best, most mind-blowing twist at the end, alright, that, makes everything worthwhile. The fact is, I've watched, 10 episodes of watching Agata and Sonozaki be completely emotionless drones, alright? That's not gonna go away in my mind, right? I'm not gonna forget about 10 episodes of monotone characters for, 20 minutes of awesomeness, right? That doesn't make up for 20 minutes, or 20, that whole time of them being stale and boring characters. And that's what I really don't like about this anime. It's, for characters with such great designs, they're extremely shallow. Like, we're already talking about characters, but I wanna know, do you guys have any favorites here in terms of personality? Because we've already talked about design.
Yeah, okay, that's the thing. In terms of personality, I'll be honest with you, I have to go back to, I forgot his name. I really forgot his name.
Who is he? Just what does he do?
The Hikikomori character.
Hisomu
Ishihara.
The reason I like Ishiharu is because he's kind of wise. It's kind of odd, but he's very wise in a way. He's there when Kachon needs him. He's staying in his house, which is kind of creepy at times. And yes, he is used as a trope, and he's used as a joke in many cases with his orgasms and stuff. But at the same time, I think as a character, if you strip all of the kind of flesh away, he's kind of skeleton. He's a very wise character. He's very calm. He talks about things very logically as well.
Can you give an example of this, actually?
Like, for example, when he's speaking with him, when the moment he hasn't eaten and he just gives him the canned foods, he's speaking with him. He's having a conversation with him on a one-to-one level. He's there for Katron even when no one is there anymore. That moment where everyone's like, oh, we shouldn't just talk to each other until the Kiznaiver program ends. Ishimaru is still with him.
It's Yoshimar.
You know what?
You know what, Vish? The fact that you can't remember your favorite character's name is kind of worrying me.
Yeah, it's kind of concerning.
He's not really my favorite character. I think he's just a really good character in terms of how he is.
So you're saying you don't have a real favorite? You kind of just have people.
I just have characters I really like. And another character I really like is Tenga, because the reason I like Tenga is because he's a fucking idiot at sometimes. He's the meathead. Yes, Kevin, he's the meathead of this anime. He's he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fucking beat.
So it'd be like a chav then. Just to use,
he's the kanji of this anime in a way. He's the tough guy because kanji Tatsumi is a tough guy, but then it's revealed that he has a soft inner shell. Same thing with Tenga, and I kind of relate to that. And this guy is tough, and but he's really sweet on the inside. He really cares about what other people think of him, and he really just wants to get pain over and done with because it affects him a lot. That's why he doesn't want to stay sweating in that pain, especially when he asks Chidori to just reject me already. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to think about it, because he sees how much it's affecting Chidori in terms of Kachon rejecting her. He doesn't want to feel the same way for himself.
Oh my god. I just want to say right now, Chidori in this show, it was basically cockblock the anime for her.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I felt so sorry for Chidori. And
she's like Hakaze from Blossom Tempest because her love is completely unrequited, and you feel like shit for her, right? Because that's all she does during the entire anime. She just gets shot down over and over and over, right?
But the thing is, like, she's introduced as the girl next door / childhood friend. The thing is, Kachon can't even fucking remember his own childhood. At points, I was like, okay, if she's the childhood friend, then she must know about the Kiznaiver system. Well, she didn't, and it was just like, okay, how the hell is she kind of related to Kachon? We don't even know about their past or anything. This is an issue I have with her as a character, and it's blatantly obvious that she was at the beginning a very wise character, and towards the end you see her become the tsundere character, and it's just like, really, is this how it's going to play off?
I have to agree with you there, Bish, because yeah, at the beginning it's interesting that you mentioned that she seems pretty wise, right? And I have to agree there. At the beginning, I had really high hopes for her character, right? Because she seemed like, you know, the second main character, right? She seemed to be like the sidekick for Gata. But as the show progressed, unfortunately, I think that, unfortunately for her, she kind of devolved into being defined by her relationship with the Gata, that is being, you know, cockblocked constantly and being a tsundere, right? And that's a problem with, I think, not only for Chidori, but for a lot of characters in the show, where they're just kind of limited to these tropes and they never really break out of that shell.
And you know, this is the one thing I think the episode that caused a lot of this problems was the episode where they decide, oh, this person will like this character and this person will like this character.
Yeah, that was episode 9. That was bullshit.
That pissed me off because it was just like, you basically effectively started a relationship where Nico likes Tenga, and it's like, we didn't know about this, and you just introduce it, and it's just like, oh yeah, so we didn't know about this, and I don't think Nico even knew about it until it happened, and then she was like, oh my god, I'm in love with Tenga.
Yeah, I can actually agree with that.
And it's the same thing with Tenga as well. It's like, Tenga likes Chidori, okay, I can sort of understand that.
Yeah, that I could see that. Like with Nico, maybe it
wasn't as obviously blatant with, you know, Yuta and Maki. That was a blatant.
That was telegraphed.
You know, we knew that, and that's, you know, everything is just so obvious, and it's just like, that episode fucked me over because they're trying too hard, and this is where I felt that the anime kind of went downhill. I know we're talking about characters, but I think this kind of affected the character development of the anime and the anime in general.
Okay,
it's that the anime focused on being a romance anime after this. And that fucked it up, because usually in romance anime, you need a lot of time to kind of focus on the character development. And unfortunately, they done it in such a way where it was like, oh yeah, okay, let's just show everyone's emotions at once. And that it just went downhill.
I would take that a step further. It didn't become a romance anime at that episode. It was trying to be in a romance anime all along, but it kind of fucks up. Because obviously, you know from the start, right, that either Agata is going to be with Sonozaki, or he's going to be with Chidori, right? So there's already some shipping there going on, right? And obviously you know that he's kind of destined to be with Sonozaki, right? So they're trying to lead you into these ships right from the get-go. So right from the start, there's already some characteristics of a romance anime. But the fuck-ups don't become apparent until episode 9, or no, not as blatantly apparent until episode 9, because the thing is, the character development really does not, you know, really show up until that point, right? Because at episode 9, like you said, these ships are kind of thrown together at the last minute without any real basis, right? You don't know why these characters like each other. They just randomly do, right? You aren't really given any hints, subtle or not, about what character likes who. So it's really frustrating when they kind of, you know, throw this at you at the last minute, right? It's a curveball, effectively.
I do agree that it should have been foreshadowed from the get-go. Like, even like with Yuta and Maki, that was pretty apparent. But with Nico and Tenga, I didn't really know until the people who were running the Kizuna system, like, started talking about, like, the mission to connect.
Even then, for Tenga and Chidori, I didn't feel that there was too much to say that they were, you know, attracted to one another, or you know, Tenga was attracted to Chidori. And, you know, people who like this show, right, they'll be like, oh yeah, but guys, their emotions are being controlled with the Kizuna system, right? Which is true. They were manipulating the characters' emotions to get them to like one another, right? To create tension, to create conflict, right? To further the Kizuna program. But nonetheless, we understand why it happened. I understand why it happened, right? It's necessary for the plot, but at the same time, it was done in such a rushed manner, and it felt so lazy in terms of story writing that it was kind of like a giant fuck you, right? And there was that part of episode 9 that I didn't like. You may have noticed that I said it was, you know, I liked it earlier, but that moment kind of ruined the episode. It kind of fucks up the end of the episode, especially when, you know, you learn about the characters' emotions, because like a few minutes before that, they're kind of, you know, throwing ships out of nowhere. So it's really frustrating.
That's the thing. I think it leaves a bad taste in my mouth for the rest of the anime as well, because it's just like, you blatantly know Trigger was trying to make this some sort of romance, even though they didn't mean to. It tried to come out like that, and it kind of failed. And it's also the fact that even towards the end, in the end scene of the anime, where Nico is talking about, you know what, I'm gonna have fights with Chidori about my love for Tenga, and I'm like, just
yeah, it's just
stop.
Completely out of character, right? Like these
exactly.
characters are bad enough already, all right? I'll be honest. Throwing cliche stuff like this
I disagree,
out of the blue,
but I don't think the characters are bad. I just feel that they haven't got enough character development. Like, for example,
Okay.
let's talk
Yeah.
about
Alright.
talk about the characters one by one. Tenga, he's the meathead. We've already spoken about him. Nico, I think this is very important because there's a lot of hype on Twitter and there's a lot of hype on the internet in general about Nico, and everyone's comparing her to another character called Nico, aka Nico Yazawa from Love Live. And they're saying she is the good Nico, but I'm here to say that yeah, Nico's a cool character, but at the same time, she's a very tropey character. And let me explain why. Because we hear this, that she's a rich kid and she just wants to be unique. She wants to be herself and all this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah.
But at the same time, let's name another character who's like that. And another thing is she doesn't want to be, first of all, she wants to have friends. Second of all, she's Senna, basically. She's Senna.
She's like Senna, but you take out all the good parts about Senna, and that's
In a
the
way,
shell
yes.
that's left. That's Nico.
And this is the thing. She has the elements of Senna and Mugi-chan in that sense of being a rich kid who wants to be unique and who doesn't want people to have too much attention on her because she's the rich kid. You know what I mean?
For Senna, it's the opposite, though.
For Senna,
think
it's
you're the
opposite
line
in a
there.
way, but I would say she's kind of like Senna because Senna just wants friends. And also she reminds me a lot of Mako from Kill la Kill. And the reason I say this is because there are elements, those elements when Mako does those kind of dances or those kind of animated features, like her hair will change and stuff like that. And Nico also has that. Maybe it's Studio Trigger going for a certain character's archetype and they just want to kind of continue it. They said, okay, look, this worked for Kill la Kill, let's put it for Kiznaiver. Maybe, because I've kind of noticed this as well.
They do have a cult following.
They do, and I think it's even with the way the animations were, like the animations for the scars kind of reminded me of the transformation scenes from Kill la Kill. Even the font and the text of the logos were very similar. The color palettes that they used as well, but
For that, at least, I believe it was a good thing. Like the character design and the animation and stuff, I think that was good. The tropey characters, not so much, right? And Bish, yeah, it is true that, they are potentially good characters, right? That could be good if they have enough development, right? But I believe the reason why I say that they're bad characters is because as it stands, other than Maki, sort of, they're all pretty shell. You know very little about them, and like I said before, they're basically archetypes, right? In fact, Sonozaki herself says that, they're based on the quote-unquote 7 sins, right? So they're just 7 archetypes that you find in high schools, right?
the 7 tropes of anime.
Exactly.
That's what they are.
The 7 sins of anime. There you go.
Whoa,
Mind blown! Right? But let's get back on track because, we are talking about characters, but we were talking about favorite characters, least favorite characters. And, it's fine. Because, Bish, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to crush your dreams. Because my least favorite character, we'll start with the least favorite characters, just to get this out of the way. My least favorite characters, I believe, are Hisomu and Tenga, or at least a certain aspect of Tenga.
My favorite character, that's pretty obvious already, it's Nico, but it isn't really just about her personality. Well, it isn't just about her design and like how she's all goofy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's more because like she was there when nobody else was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that same can be said with Hisomu as well.
Well, here's the thing. I'm also considering design and stuff. I'm saying not only because like design stuff, because I also consider her design to be the best in the show.
Like aesthetically, or like from personality wise, like
her personality is very free flow. Like she doesn't really think. She kind of she thinks she's very simple minded. It's like she's always very random, and like her reactions are always like very funny. They were very funny to me throughout the series. I just liked how she cared about every character, and she cared about bonding, making everyone bond together.
Yeah, in that I have to agree with you there. You could say, I'll play the devil's advocate. Yes, yet again. You could say that the fact that she doesn't think and she expresses herself constantly. You could say that because of that she kind of seems like a shallow character. But at the same time, I think Joe might agree with us here. It's that in spite of her shallowness, Nico is still very likable, right? Because unlike some of the other characters like Yuta or Hisomu, which can be interesting characters in their own right, despite the fact that she's kind of tropey, the fact that she's very energetic and, really funny kind of makes up for that.
Yeah, like I said, I've said this in past episodes, I love characters that have that kind of personality. It's like characters that are very energetic, that are just very random and very caring, compassionate. It's like those, in my mind, are some of the best characters you can see in an animation.
Any other characters other than Nico, or is Nico like the only best girl?
Here's the thing, like she's my favorite, but I can't hate every other character. Like I liked the character, I liked all the females. Like I liked Chidori. Like I felt
That's it. Joe likes
Whoa,
all the
what
females.
about
I
the
don't know
male
what
characters, Joe?
No, I thought we're talking. Well, we're talking about best. I thought we were talking about best girl. Best character. Well, best girl would be like I don't have like she's my favorite character. But as far as females go, I like them all, and with males, I like them all as well. It's like, but in the end, I kind of just like all the characters in some way to some extent.
Is there any character that you disliked more than the others, perhaps, or just like all of them on the same level?
Of course, they're not on the same level. Like I could say, like for example, I liked Agato more than say Hisomu. It's like it's something like that, or like I liked Tenga more than
Okay,
Yuta.
so basically you're saying that there's no overall worst character for you. It's just that you compare the characters, right? And some of them are worse than others. Is that correct? Huh.
Yeah, by comparison, it isn't like there's a character I just don't like. It's kind of like I like them all to some extent, but there's some that are better than others.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean?
By the way, guys, you guys can't see this, but Joe actually has a picture of Nico as his Skype profile icon. So yeah, he's definitely
Yeah,
Team
so
Nico.
you can understand why I was ready to slick Kevin in the throat when he was bashing Nico.
Yeah, well, I'm not even mad at you, Joe. You did your duty to protect your best girl. So you did what you must, right? But unfortunately, I will do what I must do as well, and that is voice my least favorite and favorite characters. Note that nothing personal here. I'm just giving my honest opinion on what I think of these characters. All right, and Hisomu. Like I said, I know that a lot of people like Hisomu, right? I personally don't get it, right? I'll tell you why. Hisomu, it's the fact that he's really weird, right? And he's really eccentric, perhaps a bit too eccentric. And for me, personally, I like characters that I can relate to, right? Relatability is very important in shows for me because that establishes a connection between the person who's watching and the character themselves. That creates a special link, right? It gives you a reason to care about, right? With Hisomu, there is none of that, right? Because, I'm not a masochist. I don't know any people personally who are masochists. And it's not only that, it's that, like so many other characters in this show, it's done to death, all right? The fact that he's a masochist is done to death. It's like his main defining character trait, all right? So much so, in fact, that his other character points, the other aspects of his personality are never fully exploited because it always loops back to him liking pain, all right? No matter what it is, it's always, lol, guys, look at Hisomu. He's having pleasure because he's getting beaten or he's feeling pain,
Let me just say something here. If that wasn't there, if they introduced the fact that he liked pain and then they took it away, then it kind of defeats the purpose of him being introduced as that character anyway, so that it needs to be there. But I do agree with you. I think it is overplayed at times.
Like, I'm not saying I hate him. I'm not saying he's reviling, right? It's just that his character development is hurt because time and time again, as soon as some potential thread is explored here, it always goes back to the same trope over and over and over, right? And eventually, I just got bored of it because he's really mysterious, right? He's the character that I'd say that the least about, right? So he has so much potential here, and it's being completely wasted, and that's so frustrating as a viewer, right? Because you're always like, oh, maybe next episode we'll find out more about Hisomu and why he is like who he is. But the reasoning they gave us in the show is, oh, lol, that's just who he is, man. Just deal with it. So it's kind of like a fuck you.
I kind of agree with that. Like I'd actually say that as well. Like, but I kind of agree with you. I'd say like. I did like I said, I like each character to some extent, but I think Hisomu was my least favorite character, like in that sense, because it's like yes, he was very smart, like despite his masochistic personality, but like he was just random, like for some reason he was in this random apartment in a random place. It's like, I kind of want to know, like, why was he there? Like, they explained it to some extent, but, like, it's not enough.
It's not, they give you I'm not saying that they don't give you the reasoning for things, right? You know why he's a masochist. He's a masochist because that's who he is, right? And I'm not saying that's an invalid explanation, right? Because that's what happens in real life, right? Sometimes there isn't an explanation. But in a show, in entertainment, that's not a very satisfying answer, right? That's boring. And that's why I don't like him. It's just like so many other characters in this show. Yeah, they're potentially interesting, but they're limited to these tropes, right? And characters they play such a big role in the emotional impact that they have on the viewer, right? Just like music, for example, right? And that's what I want to talk about now. Is the characters we already established that they weren't too impressive at certain points. But do you guys think that the music was good? Because for me, I found that the music was actually quite nice. It wasn't consistent, I might say, because I wasn't constantly being wowed by it. But there were certain moments where I actually pause the anime and I'm like, okay, wow, that's actually pretty damn good, right? I find that the score, I'm not sure who composed the score for this anime, but it was pretty damn solid. All right, there are many moments where the score goes perfectly with what's going on screen, right? And it's mainly in scenes where either A, shit's going down, so it's really tense, right? And it really makes you feel the pressure, or B, it's supposed to be emotional and it makes you sad. Though, as good as the music is, it can't make up for, the downfalls in anime. So even in the sad scenes, even the music could not, bring me to, cry, because...
I agree. I agree there. I think, as a lot of trigger shows tend to have really nice OSTs, and this obviously didn't disappoint, but as you mentioned, the OST has to go with some sort of content on the screen. I think the content on the screen, as you mentioned, was very inconsistent, didn't quite match at some point, and when they did match, it didn't quite excuse the shitty story.
The music can only do so much, right?
Exactly.
The
music is there to support what's going on there, and if there's not much going on in terms of the anime, the music is not going to help it out much. The music is there to emphasize what's going on. It's not there to be the star of the show, and we know this. But in terms of the opening and the ending, and I think these are very awesome things. Didn't really like the ending. I really loved the opening.
Wow.
The reason I liked the opening was because it I don't know, it just felt really chill. And the way the strobe lights were going on, it was very unique for an anime. And I liked how the characters were moving around in the character sketches and whatnot. How they were moving around and they were very really super crisp, and how they were drawn and whatnot. And it just really felt nice. It was very simple, and it was great. Although I do have an issue about the the strobe lights moving around. Shouldn't they put a warning? Yes. For people who get seizures and stuff, because I'm not sure if it would induce a seizure, but
I do endorse disclaimers or seizure warnings, but at the same time, it professionally just doesn't look good when you're trying to show an opening.
Personally, I didn't find that as a problem, because there were lots of colors, but I didn't find that it was flickering as much. It was simply moving on the screen.
Yeah, so maybe I don't know.
I don't know.
It was it was more surreal than it was very flashy.
I found
it felt very psychedelic as well, and I like that. It let me kind of chill. It reminded me of, I don't know. It reminded me of the Beatles. Have you seen a music video for the Beatles or something? It kind of reminded me of Yellow Submarine or Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. These kind of stuff. It reminded me of that kind of 60s era. I don't know why. The music itself didn't. It was just the strobe lights and everything that was going on. I just felt chill, man.
I'd say that unlike strobe lights that flicker on and off, where it's really choppy, I find that the way that they handled the light and the way they played with it, it was really smooth, right? And there was this sort of flow that was created, right? So it was not choppy and really brisk. It was nice and smooth, and it went along really well with the music, right? Speaking of the music, though, for the opening, what you guys think about that? I personally, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not great either for me. I found it was all right, okay? It was just typical electronic music for me. What you guys think of the music for the opening?
The music for the opening, I quite liked it. If I'm not mistaken, it's done by Boom Boom Satellites. I'm not sure if that's actually the name, or maybe I'm making it up. They're part of Sony Productions or Sony Music, whatever. You can tell it's done by a band, professional band or whatever. I enjoyed it. I found it was very unique for an anime. I haven't heard an anime with such an opening like that before, and I think it matched well with the lights and the way the characters were jumping around in their triangles and stuff. It really made me feel kind of cool. Yeah. Does it work?
It's also the name of an EP done by the same band. It's actually their final record, because their vocalist and guitarist Michiyuki Kawashima was actually having health problems.
So this wasn't made specifically for the anime, though.
Well, it doesn't say anything about it being used specifically, but it's the track released relatively recently. The EP released June 22nd. So the track, maybe it was the first time it was used, but it's probably a more general use.
in terms of like the way it was paired with the animation, I think that was nice, right? Not gonna lie. The music itself, standalone, it's pretty run of the mill in my opinion. It's pretty standard.
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't download it, right? If that's what you're asking, I would not download this and listen to this on my own time. No, it did what it had to. The animation was really crisp. The music, less so, in my opinion. What do you think, Joe?
Well, like I said, I really loved the opening. It was very like it was the one of the few intros that I usually don't skip. Well, actually, I think I don't really skip many intros because I do like the music I listen to generally. But this intro was like something that's like this is something that I'm required to listen to every time. It's because it just felt really good listening to it. Like I had this surreal feeling within me.
It does.
It's kind of like just looking at it just felt relaxing.
What? Bish, we talked about the opening, right? But what I noticed before though is, Bish, you said that you didn't really like the ending that much. Like, why is that?
I don't know. It's because sometimes the episodes kind of end on such a dramatic point, and then the ending is just it's a letdown.
So you're saying the ending didn't fit, like...
Ending didn't fit some of the endpoints within that episode, for example. And the best thing about the opening is the fact that an opening, of course...
Yeah, that precedes all the action.
Exactly, because it precedes everything. So it doesn't really matter what you put for the opening. But the ending is very important because it sets the scene for the next episode. And then when you have such a soft kind of song or whatever, not song, composition, it's especially in such a tense moment, it's like, what the hell is this? I think they would have benefited from having a second ending. But of course, the anime is not long enough to have a second ending or a second opening.
Yeah, second endings and openings usually come after 13 episodes.
Yeah, it's for like 2 core episodes, animes. And unfortunately, this is not long enough. But I don't know. Personally, I do agree that perhaps sometimes the action was really tense, and then it kind of transitioned to this song, right, which is really slow and serene. But I personally viewed that as an advantage, right? I really liked the way it was really peaceful and serene, especially with the background art, because it was Sonozaki, if you don't recall correctly. It was Sonozaki in the background during the majority of that ending, right? So it really fits her character in a way. In fact, I'd say that it kind of, the ending actually fits her character more than some moments from the actual anime itself, right? Because it's really slow and peaceful, and it kind of matches her because she is always calm, right? She never really has any extreme emotions, right? Because, of the accident that happened.
Right, and on my opinion, about the about the outro, I enjoy it, but like although I can agree with Bish that at some points it didn't really fit the end of some episodes, I do gotta say, like, in its own right, it's nice to listen to. Like it's not the first time I've heard something like it, but it's one of the better ones out there.
Like, I wouldn't say that either the opening or ending are like amazing. I wouldn't put it on any top lists out there, but they do their jobs adequately, and we can give them credit for that. In terms of we've talked about the way things were animated, the opening and ending. What do you guys think about the way the characters and the action was animated and drawn within the anime itself, though?
This is very interesting. For all the downfalls in the anime, I think this is really one of the positive points. I love the kind of colors that they use, as well as the line art as well, and the way they animate certain characters. For example, Nico, she's very she's poppy, she jumps about, and she's very unique in what she does as a character, similar to Mako from Kill la Kill, as I mentioned before. She has a very unique palette of movements, let's say. It's also the colors as well, as I mentioned. Nico's very colorful as a character, and even the other characters, they're very colorful as well. Like, I can't even remember. Yuta has blue hair, and the other guy has purple hair. Even the way the scenery looks is quite nice. It's kind of like this metropolitan type scene, and I don't know, it's like it has its dark kind of moments. Like there's a nice contrast between the colors. You have your really bright colors when it's daytime, and then when it's nighttime and more serious things are happening, it's more dark and gritty and things like that. One thing I liked in terms of the animation was the scene where they were traveling on that underground train, and it was just very empty, and you had the kind of dim lighting, and to me I kind of felt connected to that. It felt very realistic. Even though it's an anime, it just felt really realistic. And I feel like that must have been a success for the animation team that did that one scene just because of that. Because I just felt, to me, it popped out. Mainly because I travel on trains a lot, but still, I kind of connected with that scene. Like, probably more than the whole no, that's going too far there.
Ouch.
But that's obviously a joke. But
well, yeah.
What about you guys? What do you think of the animation and art style?
Actually, well,
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. I was actually very surprised by how the animation looked, because if you look at past shows, like if you look at Gurren Lagann or if you look at Kill la Kill, like they have stylized but very sloppy designs. Like even Space Luluco, like which aired kind of side by side. It's like it's very how do I describe it? It's like a sloppy, but not the bad kind of sloppy. You know what I mean?
Like very laid back.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Joe, because if we look at Kill la Kill, there are moments where you can tell that it's kind of choppy in terms of its animation, and
yeah, but it kind of
benefits it in the style of Kill la Kill, because sometimes it helps with jokes and stuff. But Kiznaiver has a very like refined kind of art style.
Yeah, it's very refined. It's very sharp.
But at the same time, you can still tell it's a trigger anime from it.
Yeah, despite that, it's still pretty goofy.
Like if you look at if you look at Nico, for example, like I saw like that trigger style the most in Nico. Like it's not a matter of like because she's my favorite character. It's more like you could see like with her expressions, like she reminded me of Mako. She was like straight up Mako at some points, which was very funny and very enjoyable.
I have to.
So like I just like how. I liked how colorful it was. I liked how sharp it was. It was like very high quality animation, and for something that's simulcasting, it's like impressive they were able to keep the quality up. Like you can only imagine how it's gonna look in the DVD release.
And I've said quite a bit about my thoughts on character design at the beginning. I think that it's great, really good. Despite my many gripes about this anime, considering like about the characters, one thing that they did very well about the characters is design. Like I said, they're very unique, right? No two characters look the same, and it's really fitting because their personalities are very different as well, right? And I found it's really interesting, Joe, that you mentioned how sharp the characters look, because I find that they look sharp, but not in a way that makes them flat or boring, right? It's obviously this design is not something that you'd see in perhaps a more serious anime, right? It's very colorful, very cheerful, and it pops out, right? And really catches your attention. Other than that,
right. And I also want to mention. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm surprised we haven't mentioned the mascot of the show, the Gomorins.
Gomorins I don't have too much to say on. I will say that they're pretty cute, all right? They look nice, but I just never understood why they were there, right? They're just kind of...
How do they look cute? They look like a rotted ball sack. That's what they look like. It looks like someone squeezing a scrotum. That's what they look like.
Damn, okay. Well,
the reason they were there is just they're just the mascot of Sugomori City. It's kind of like the trait of...
Yeah, it is. And it's actually Sugomori's soft toy.
Personally, interestingly enough, I found that they're really cute because they're nice and round and really they look really huggable, right? It reminds me of that one character from Persona 4, right? And you probably won't agree with this, but...
What, Teddy?
Yeah.
No, fuck you, man.
No. But they're huggable. They're nice. They're so big and round.
No, you're just...
Bish, just let go of those aggressive feelings and just hug the Gomorins.
Let's say the Gomorins remind me of Guts. Guts from Kill la Kill. They remind me of Guts. They have a similar character design to Guts. You guys remember Guts, Joe?
Oh, I remember.
I haven't watched Kill la Kill yet, so I can't comment.
It's like Guts died, and then they took his rotted corpse and reanimated him.
No, you're really mean.
That's the Gomorin.
You really must not like this character or this mascot.
No, it's not like I don't like them. I just feel like they just don't look right. They don't look like a lovable
say that
mascot.
The fucked up ones at the end, like the black ones, then I definitely agree because they look like they're on fucking drugs or something. Right? They look fucked up.
I like those ones better.
I like to think of them. As the Monokumas.
Yeah, they are. They're like because shit, they are like the Monokumas of. Oh, Joe, I just want to mention this before we go on to gripes and grumbles. But doesn't Maki remind you of Peko? Just saying. She's so Peko. Anyway, another thing I wanted to mention was for all those people that don't like Love Live, I just want to say this. Have you noticed that Maki is a character from Love Live? Honoka, which is Maki's, I believe, first name or surname, is another character from Love Live, and Nico is another character from Love Live. Mind blown. That's 3 characters from Love Live making their way into this fucking anime. Just saying, mind blown.
To continue with that point, if Nico from Love Live is anything like the Nico from this anime, she's a fucking fake.
No, that's not the point. I mean, like, the names were, I'm not going to say were inspired, but just maybe someone from Studio Trigger really loves Love Live, and he was like, you know what, we got to put as many Love Live references as we can, and...
Well, you heard it here. This is Bish's head.
Yeah.
This is my
It
canon.
is possible. I was thinking of that too when I saw Nico. I was like, coincidence? I think not, but...
Some people will disagree,
yeah.
but, you know.
No, after Bish just trash-talked Gomoden, which I personally find insulting, let's move on to the ending, actually, because, we were talking about the shitty Gomoden design at the end, and I have a lot to talk about the ending. I don't know about you guys, but I'll be honest, the last episode sends it gives me mixed signals, all right? Because on one side, I want to care about Sanzaki and Agata, right? Because... the backstory of the 19 children in the original experiment, it's kind of sad, right? You can't help but feel bad for them, right? On the flip side, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but you know how in the end Agata's like, oh no, Sonozaki, you have to share your pain with others, right? You can't just, contain it within yourself anymore, right? He says that. But then my first reaction to that was like, wait, what the fuck? Are you telling me that Noriko was able to fucking share her pain like willingly this entire fucking time? Like, where did that come from, right? Because this was never mentioned before that point. So, in my opinion, at its best, this is terribly explained plot. At its worst, this is like a Deus Ex Machina, right? It's just pulled out of nowhere for the convenience of the plot.
Well, I actually do want to say rebuttal for that, because they actually did explain it to some extent, where it's like the reason she could release all this pain, but she didn't want to, was because she believed that she had that huge belief this entire time that the reason she's able to know all these people and connect with them was because she had this pain within her. She believed like this pain helped her connect with them, and that's kind of why she wanted to spread her pain through Sugomori City in the first place.
Even then, if you're going to go, oh yeah, the pain is what connects her, I don't get why she needs to take the drugs. And they say that she needs to take the drugs because she gets like, all the pain is
It's too much. It's a painkiller, effectively.
But I understand that. Think about this. Where is that pain coming from? It's coming from the 19 people from the experiment, right? What are those 19 people doing? They're sitting on a fucking chair. They're not doing anything, right?
Well, it's because the problem is that it wasn't sent back. Like, her pain wasn't sent back.
Yeah, it wasn't spread across the 19 people. It was...
Yeah, that was the issue with the system in the first place. Like, it was only going one way.
That's exactly my point. They're like, whenever someone in that group would walk, the feeling on their foot, for example, would be amplified 19 times and sent to her, right? Because she's feeling all of their senses at once. But all of them are sitting in the fucking chair at that at the school.
That's not just that. It's also the fact that they were also... That's just it probably started off like that, and then it obviously worked into emotional pain, and then physical pain, because we saw this in, I think, episode 9, that episode where they were talking about the whole romance thing, where they're all sitting on the floor saying, oh, I'm in pain. You get a flashback of the kids doing the same thing, so that would affect Nori in probably even worse, that's probably 19 times going back to her, and that's fucking pain that she wouldn't be able to handle as a child. Not even as an adult, as a child is very difficult. So I can understand.
I must retort there, because I would completely agree with you if those 19 subjects that are, sending her the pain signals were still up and about. But at that point in the anime where we're at, they're vegetables. They're literally vegetables.
Yeah, no, it's because they explained that they were drained. They were essentially drained. Like, they took... Like, Nori basically took their emotions, and that's why they're vegetables.
They can't think, and they can't feel.
Yeah, they can't think, they can't feel, but the people who were sane, like Agato, were released. But, like, there are a lot of people still didn't survive, which is why they're kind of sitting in the courtyard.
Yeah, I know, but my point is, like, why does she need those drugs if the people that are supposed to cause her pain are not doing anything? They can't really cause her pain if they're not walking around. They're just lying around being vegetables.
Because the pain is still within her.
The pain's still within her, and she's also getting pain from the main character. Bear in mind, he used to get beaten up, for money.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize who that pain was going through, and he still had that Kiznaiver connection with Nori-chan, and Nori-chan was feeling that pain. Imagine that.
Right, like it didn't go back to them, like it never did.
Yeah, but
Like it was kind of like it's not like a one-way path. You can't go back that path.
yeah, it is true that he was beaten. But then again, when Agata was connected in the Kizuna system with the other 6, they were feeling the pain too, right? And that's the same pain that she would feel. The thing is, she's feeling the pain from Agata, right? But the 18 others, excluding those who are dead, obviously, they're not doing anything because they're just vegetables now. That's my point.
Well, because Agato was one of the sane people who escaped, which is not escaped, like who was released, which is why he still kind of had that connection.
But even then, it's just a link between Agata and Noriko. It's the same pain that the others are dealing with, and it's not like life-threatening, right? But
I think the main thing to kind of take away from this is that, yes, the other ones are vegetables, but at the same time, vegetables can still feel pain. You know what I mean? Like, even if you're in a vegetative state, it doesn't mean you can't feel pain. Do you see what I mean? We don't know what pain they're going to go on inside it. Just because they're not showing the pain, just because they're not feeling the pain, doesn't mean that the pain is not going on. This is another thing. The anime doesn't quite explain these things, hence why we're having large discussions and kind of going off tangent. I think this is the main problem with the anime, is the fact that it doesn't explain a lot of things, especially with the whole Kiznaiver system.
it's very vague.
It's very vague, and I think this is down to the fact that this is only a 12-episode anime, and I think it would have benefited from having a lot more episodes. Potentially, I think this is how they should have structured it. Similar to Persona 4, the animation, where everyone had their own episode. You know how Chie had their episode, Kanji had their episode. I think the same thing should be here. I want to know more about Yuta's story, how he was a fat kid. I want to know more about the other characters, who I kind of forgot their name because they're kind of irrelevant. I want to know more about Nico. Nico's not really mentioned much. The fact that she doesn't believe in fairies, we just kind of forget about it. And I want to know, why does she believe in fairies?
Well,
It was mentioned, but I want to know more about that. I want to know more about the characters. I also want to know more about Chidori's relationship with Kachon, but we don't get this thing. And I think we would have got that within maybe 26 episodes. And we would have known more about the Kiznaivers. We would have known more about the original plan as well.
Right, I actually do agree with Bish. That was actually going to be my primary gripe with the show. It's really short. It's like I expected this to go on for 26 because I'm like that's kind of a bad assumption on my part. Like I should have done more research, but it's like 26 is usually like the length Trigger would go for with a series. So like when I heard 12 episodes, I'm wondering how they're gonna put all this into 12 episodes, and like because of the 12 episodes, they kind of put them at disadvantage. They couldn't do as much as they wanted to. But like then again, like it might have been a budget issue, but it's still undeniable that the small time they had with the show was one of the reasons why it was kind of falling behind.
See, this is the thing in terms of budget issue. Like, yes, it might have been a budget issue, but I think they could have, if it was a budget issue, they could have well managed their budget, because they didn't need to get a song that was licensed by Sony, Sony Records, which is a big record company. They didn't need that music. They could have just created their own music or whatever, or hired a composer or whatever to have done that, instead of going for a big fucking company like Sony for for their music licenses. I think that might have been a cost that they could have avoided, maybe.
I think that it's not just a budget issue. I do agree with you guys that perhaps it would have benefited from more episodes.
I don't think it's a budget issue. I think there's something underlying that we don't necessarily know about in terms of this. Maybe they just wanted to test something out. And to be honest, looking at the ending, I don't think that there is going to be a season 2. And if there is, God help everyone.
Yeah,
because I don't want to see a season 2.
Well, the way they ended it, I don't think there would be a way for a season 2 to happen, right? And moving back to my point about what you guys said, I do agree that perhaps more episodes would give opportunities for the characters to have their backstories explored, right? The way Maki's was. But it's not just a length issue here, right? This is why I think this way. Because if it was a length issue, then I'll use Tiger and Bunny as an example here, where not all the characters' backstories were developed, right? Some of them were well developed, others not so much, right? The thing is, in Kiznaiver, that's not the case. I think it's also a pacing issue, because in between the beginning and the ending, it's really slow, and they don't use those episodes in between the middle of the anime to develop characters. There's Maki, and it's like...
Thing is, I think that pacing and number of episodes go into hand in hand. You know, the more episodes you have, you can kind of make it a lot slower.
Yeah, the pacing is a little
You can
lenient.
spread the pacing out across more episodes, and I think that would have made it more consistent. But I see what you mean. The episodes, I think some episodes had too much things going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even within the last episode, it kind of felt like, oh, okay, so she just goes crazy within one episode and it gets resolved within one episode. Usually, like, if this happened in something like Tempest, that would go over 2 episodes, maybe 3. I'm not saying I wanted it to go over 3 episodes because I think it's a really dumb ending, let's be real here. But still, in those types of animes, they tend to give a lot more time for the ending and to kind of develop it a lot more, because I think the ending of this anime was half-assed, to be honest. It was just like, hey, let's just give them the generic ending, you know, the good ending. I did not want to see a good ending for this anime. I did not expect it, because, you know, I love good endings, but they kind of went more the romance route again, and it was just like, please, no.
But
This is a science fiction anime. We don't need this.
were you really expecting
ending.
like a really tragic ending though? Because
What
thing
I
is-
was expecting, this is what I was expecting. Because they didn't really explain the whole Kiznaiver system and how these people magically were taken out of their vegetative state. But I assumed that, you know, if she died, then everyone that was connected to her would feel her pain, including the main character Kachon, and he will feel pain because of she died or whatever. And I thought, since the beginning of the anime, I was thinking, okay, I want to give you back your pain. I was thinking, she's gonna fucking die, and that's how he's gonna get his pain back. Yes, it's a very tragic way of me thinking, but I think that was the way I was expecting. I was thinking she was gonna just jump off the bridge, and he was just gonna be in pain. And then I was like, shit, that would have made sense. Yes, not physical pain, probably physical pain because it actually is connected to that via Kiznaiver, but more so emotional pain. And I think that would have been a much better ending, and then you could have his friends support him, and then that would have been, it would have been a tragic ending, but it would have been some hope within that tragic ending.
yeah,
But it was just like a happy-go-lucky. He was like, oh yeah, look, these people are taken out of their vegetative state. And I'm not sure if you've met a vegetable before, someone who is in a vegetative state, they don't get out of it. Let's just be real.
in that case though, I'd argue that there are two different situations, right? Because they're in a vegetative state because of a very specific thing, right? Because their emotions are being drained by Sonozaki. So in that case, it's reversible. What you're talking about is not, right?
Yeah, I know, but at the same time, it's kind of...
I agree with you there, because
it's just they're making loopholes and say, yeah, they're in vegetative state because of this, and it can be taken out because of that. And it's just like, okay. It's the same thing with how Kachon can't feel pain. At the beginning, I thought he had something maybe wrong with... I thought the whole Kiznaiver program manipulated people's nerve systems. That's how I thought. I was like, okay. But then it was on a deeper emotional level, and that's, to me, the whole nerves and manipulating nerves makes more sense. Like nerve endings makes more sense rather than this whole, you know, Nori taking the pain and they're not feeling the pain. That made more sense to me personally.
Well,
but
I agree with you there. Like, I was kind of expecting a semi-serious ending myself, and in fact, I was kind of expecting this sort of the same things as you when I was watching the last episode. But what prevented me from being, disappointed as well, or as disappointed as you at least, is that I reminded myself that, yeah, this anime, there are themes here that can be explored that can be very dark, right? You know, this whole manipulation of emotions here, this whole ethics about this experiment. You know, if you think about it, this Kizuna experiment, it's not ethical at all, right? So it has the potential to be very dark, right? But you have to remember that time and time again, this anime tries to be a rom-com, right? And that really lightens the mood. And I did not think at the time that, you know, with characters like Nico being super happy and all that, you know, I didn't think that they would really, you know, dare pull a super dark ending. You know, not after all of those rom-com tropes that we saw in the anime.
I think a dark ending would have been more beneficial. It would have pissed a lot of people off, but I think it would have been more beneficial for the anime as opposed to the ending that we currently got. Well,
I mean, it's kind of the point of a dark ending. It's
Yeah.
kind of like to stir emotions in
exactly,
people,
but
make them react
the
in this
ending
way.
we got was like an easy way out. It was like, hey, look, everyone's okay now.
Yeah, like I said, it's kind of like a Deus Ex Machina. It's so convenient that things happen exactly the way they happen in the ending. So it's kind of disappointing. But even if it did end tragically, I don't think it would have saved the anime. What you guys think? Would, a super dark ending like the one Bish posed, would that have saved the anime for you guys? Or do you think the anime needed saving in the first place?
I mean, I can't say it would save it because I personally didn't think it needed much saving to begin with. Mm-hmm. It's more like I think it would have improved greatly if the end kind of ended on a tragic note.
I agree.
It's just like I do agree with Bish. Now, like I didn't really think about it until now. It's like that is a very generic ending. Like, of course, it made me happy. It's like made me happy that all these characters are all right, but at the same time, it's like it's the easy way out. It's like you kind of want them to do more with it and like do something. Trigger.
It's not bad for an ending, but it's not the best. It could have been a lot better. I think that's what we're all trying to say here.
The reason I expected a bad ending was because for people that haven't watched Kill la Kill, watch Kill la Kill and look at the ending of Kill la Kill. It was a somewhat tragic ending, but it had a light note at the end, and that's
what ending are you talking about? Are you talking about like the end of the OVA? Because that's like
no. I'm talking about the end of the animation, not the OVA. So the end of the animation had like a tragic ending, but it ended off with some sort of light note at the end. And I was expecting Kiznaiver to have a similar sort of thing. So I was disappointed in terms of that because, Trigger already got me hyped for this anime because of Kill la Kill. And because, Kill la Kill had the similar sort of art style and the action and all that kind of stuff. And to me, the ending just ruined it for me. As well as the whole trying to be a romance anime, I felt that romance had some sort of part in it, but I feel that it was forced.
It wasn't done properly, in my opinion.
It wasn't, and I think Trigger need to work on that, especially.
Speaking of the forced anime, not forced anime, the forced romance and the ending though. One thing that really pissed me off was the fact that they went along with the stuff they established in episode 9. And what I'm talking about is, the relationships that they kind of threw together super quickly. Like, even in the end, it's heavily hinted that Chidori and Tenga are a thing now, right? And I'm like, why? Why is that happening, right? I mean, it was thrown together really quickly for one episode, and it's somehow going to be like canon now, right? So it was kind of frustrating to see that, such a thing was continued,
Yeah, I kind of expected the show to have a mediocre ending when they decided that they wanted to bring in the really big twist with Dori wanting to connect the entire city via the Kizuna system in a single episode.
Well, big twist, but at the same time, it was kind of cliche.
Well, no, it's like. Well, I didn't mean to say twist. I'm kind of just trying to emphasize the point. It's like I kind of expected the show to have this mediocre ending when they decided like, oh, we're gonna introduce this big outcome in the second to last episode. It's like that's also brings to the point of if it were much longer, then it could have been able to pace that better.
But now that we've kind of, elaborated our gripes and grumbles and we've talked about characters and the design in terms of audio and stuff, would you recommend this anime? And would you watch, if there is a second season, right? Let's suppose that there is a second season. Would you watch it?
I'll start off with this. Second season, no way, because I fear what the second season will be like. Considering the ending, second season will probably be like, oh yeah, look at all of us, and I don't think it's going to be more of a Haganai type situation, and I don't think it should even be called Kiznaiver anymore. Let's be real, because it won't have anything to do with a Kizuna system. But I think an anime prequel would be very interesting. I want to see an anime about the original Kiznaiver system, where we know more about the researchers and more about the kids as well. That would be fucking badass. And Trigger, if you're listening, do that, because I think it would redeem this show on another level. It wouldn't be a second season, but it would be quite cool.
It'd be a second season, but I think that's one way they could go forward.
I think they can potentially do that in an OVA as well. Like, it doesn't need to be a whole anime series.
Because the two researchers, I forget their names because they're not honestly particularly interesting, but the two researchers, right?
The two researchers are Mutsumi Uroshibara and Kazunao Yamada.
Okay. Well, the thing is, in the flashbacks, right, we always see them, contemplating about their decisions, right? is what we're doing, is it right or wrong, right? So that'd be a really interesting thing to tackle in, say, a prequel season, right? Because I want to know more about these 19 participants that were kind of, pushed off to the side, that I don't really care about, right?
Yeah.
Or, for example, the parents of those kids, or the people behind.
Yeah, that's another thing. I want to know how the kids got into the Kizuna system. It's mentioned that their parents were sponsors or whatever, but I want to know who would actually, what type of parents would put their kid through this, knowing potentially what the outcome could be.
They were really optimistic at first, though. Everyone was buying into it.
Well, I mean, weren't the children that were part of the original Kizuna system the children of some of the researchers there?
Researchers and sponsors as well.
I think that would be much more interesting. I don't know whether I'd watch it, definitely, because I do feel that they have tackled quite a lot in this season, albeit with many flaws. But, a sequel, I wouldn't watch it, to be honest, because I fear that that would be more of a rom-com than, a thriller. They'd kind of lose the original concept and the uniqueness that this season has, the premise of the Kizuna system. They'd lose that, and I have a feeling that unless they do something really creative, it would be dumbed down to a rom-com, right? And that's not something interesting. That's not something that I would want to watch. Prequel, maybe, like you guys said, your ideas are really good, right? That'd be interesting, because that'd fill in the holes, so to speak, that were left in this anime, because we're left with so many questions, right? There's so many things that could be explored in terms of plot, in terms of character, that are potentially interesting, but it never realizes its full potential. And that's my problem here.
Right.
Would you recommend it, guys?
As for recommending it, I kind of would. It's because, again, at the end of the day, despite its flaws, it all comes down to its interesting concept with connecting everyone through pain. And I really think that's something people should get to see, despite what they may or may not think about it by the end of it. And as for wanting to see a second season, it's not something I'm against. It's more if it came, then sure, whatever, I'll give it a watch. I'll give it a few episodes, because it's I know I'm kind of letting Trigger go off easy. I know I've made it kind of prevalent throughout this episode, but it's I know they can possibly make a second season in a way that it could kind of work, but currently I can't really think of a way, but it's more I'm putting faith in them. If they were to do second season, that would be possible. But yeah. And for a prequel, I would love to see a prequel, because like I said, my favorite moment was when they were talking about the past, when they were talking about the original Kizuna system, and seeing them elaborate on those points and developing more of the characters that were involved in that system. I would love to see something like that.
Now that you mention it, unfortunately, I think that I'd have much rather had a season about, the original Kizuna program first, and then have a follow-up to that is this, because the original experiment sounds so much better.
You could have split this anime into two cores.
Exactly.
You could have split it into core
great.
1, where you talk about the original Kizuna system, and then the second core where you introduce these characters. That would be very cool. Because in a way, you still have the same characters. You have Nori and Kachon from, the first core going into the second core. That would be cool. And I think Studio Trigger, you know what? Just, you should hire me, because I'm giving you great ideas. I gave you the idea of using a OVA or a prequel to kind of fix the shit that you're in, and also the split core thing. So, just hit me up on Twitter at Get Alive Podcast, just saying.
Now hiring.
Yeah. So, I know that's obviously a joke. In terms of recommending it to a friend, hell no. I would not recommend this show to a friend.
Okay.
I think I would recommend a much better kind of show which has similar themes.
Would you recommend it to anyone, period? Not just your friends?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And there's much better anime to recommend. If someone wants an anime that's about mystery and characters learning about each other and their true selves and kind of learning about their emotions, I think Persona is a much better anime of doing it. Because we learn about the characters' emotions, we learn about what they're going through, and I think that Persona is a much better Kizuna system than the Kizuna system ever was.
Bish is a savage.
But yeah. I'm just being honest here. I wouldn't recommend this to anyone.
It is true, though. Brute honesty. I have to agree, but I wouldn't be as harsh as Bish. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to any of my friends, right? Because I don't think any of my friends would be interested in this, all right? And if anyone, watched this anime beforehand and told me their thoughts and the way I did about the anime, I probably wouldn't watch either. So it's really hard to recommend, right? Because of its many, many flaws. Because, I really like characters, right? Characters and story are the two main things that drive an anime for me, personally, okay? And like I said, I found that there are like pacing issues, and the characters are really tropey, right? So they're quite shallow too. So those two things really make me hesitate to recommend it to anyone. I have to agree with Joe though, in that perhaps it's worth recommending to some people. If you're really fucking bored, the premise alone perhaps gives you a reason to give it a shot. Not perhaps watch the entire thing, but the premise is interesting. It's worth a shot if you're bored, but it's not the best out there. I would not rank it as the best in anything, except perhaps, maybe character design. But in terms of story, music even, plot, there are better anime out there, like Bish said. So is it, the worst anime I've seen? No, definitely not. But it's not something that I'd be telling people that, you have to watch this anime. And neither is it something that I would recommend to newcomers. Definitely not, all right? This is not really representative of anime industry, of shows that you see out there. It has an interesting premise, but it falls short in so many ways that I just can't bring myself to recommend it to everyone. Now, that being said though, with Bish and his brutal, savage honesty, I think that, so guys, with us giving our thoughts on, our gripes and grumbles, the plot, the characters and stuff, I think that, it's about time we wrap up. And, if at any point during this episode you're like, Bish, Kevin, Joe, what the hell, guys? You're totally wrong, you're just hating on Best Girl, or you're just hating on, Trigger, you're not giving them a chance.
Or if you're like, oh, Joe, you were such an amazing commentator in this podcast, and I really want to send some love mail to you.
Really humble, Joe.
Yeah, and if you want to draw, fanfics of Joe and send it to him, he loves that. He won't admit it, but Joe loves that to bits, all right?
I'm always willing to see the content of the fans. Because I am for the fan.
Joe, I can't give you that title. The title doesn't go over you.
I will never take that title, but it doesn't mean I can deny my fans.
Seriously though, if you want to contact us and send us stuff, we're on Twitter at GALPKunai. That's KUNAI. That's our official Twitter page. Or if you want to talk to us personally on our personal Twitter pages, Bish, what's your Twitter page?
It's at Get a Life Podcast as always.
Mine's The Tempest Phoenix. I must specify that Phoenix is spelled with F-E-N-I-X and not, the normal way, because I'm too cool for spelling. Anyways, remember to put a capital in front of each word, or else I will not read your email or your tweets. And Joe.
And I am at KiboGamer, spelled K-I-B-O-U-G-A-M-E-R.
If you want to talk to us on email, and you want to send us stuff via email, we have an email address as well. You can send us stuff at glp.pea, so like P, at gmail.com. Anyways, as usual, we'll be announcing our next episode, so you tell our fans what the next episode's about.
Our next episode is going to be Yamada-kun and the Seven Witches.
I'm actually pretty damn hyped. I'm not gonna lie.
Also referred to by Kevin as Waifu Wars Part 3.